Welcome to Supercool, the show about real-world climate solutions that cut carbon, improve profitability, and enhance modern life. Each week on Supercool, we go behind the headlines to pinpoint the stories and data accelerating the low-carbon economy in towns and cities across the U.S. and around the globe. I'm your host, Josh Dorfman. Stay up to date on Supercool by subscribing or following us wherever you're listening, and please leave us a review. Eric Corey-Fried is not a patient person, and that's a good thing. For decades, he's been on a relentless quest to change how we build. Because, as he told Time Magazine last fall, what we have now is almost the exact opposite of what we need. Instead of buildings that degrade our planet, Eric envisions a world where the more we build, the better off we are. He's been practicing and advocating for sustainable architecture for so long that San Francisco Magazine named him Best Green Architect 2 decades ago, back in 2005. He literally wrote Green Building for Dummies. And while the rest of us were desperate to escape our homes during COVID, Eric used his downtime to write Circular Economy for Dummies, making a crucial economic concept more accessible to the world. He's a practitioner, a leader, a provocateur, and a damn funny TEDx speaker. I first interviewed him in the mid-2000s on my SiriusXM show, The Lazy Environmentalist. As you'll hear today, he's as focused, witty, and urgent as ever. In 2019, an opportunity opened that vastly expanded Eric's scope of influence. CannonDesign, one of the largest architecture firms in the world, came calling. Founded in 1915, the firm had a storied history. What it didn't have was a real sustainability strategy. Now, Eric had been courted by global firms before, but the fit was never quite right. This time, though, he was ready. Years spent working with the Living Building Institute, Eco Districts, and the X Prize had given him a new perspective on how to drive change, how to get the biggest clients to say yes to cutting-edge sustainability. With CannonDesign, he finally had the platform. Fast forward to 2024, and the results speak for themselves. Metropolis Magazine named CannonDesign Firm of the Year and winner of its Planet Positive Awards. Time Magazine ran a featured article titled, "The Design Firm Making Net Zero Emissions Buildings a Reality." Did Eric make that happen? It's safe to say none of it would have happened without him. And that's the underlying theme of today's conversation, because changing how we build and making net zero buildings the standard is the most urgent challenge facing the entire building industry today. The best examples show us what's possible to cut carbon and in the process design and construct buildings that enhance modern life. But the road ahead is long. That's why this conversation and everything Eric has to say feels so critical right now. Here's our conversation. Eric, welcome to Supercool.
Thank you for having me. I'm always amazed that anybody asks me to go anywhere or do anything. So I'm just happy to be talking, not to myself.
Well, there's so much to talk with you about today around your work and CannonDesign and, gosh, the many, many things that you seem to do, even just to pass the time, like write books on circular design for dummies. Got some time during the pandemic. I'll just write like a cutting-edge classic now. But before we get into all of that, I looked up, where does CannonDesign rank today in terms of top architecture firms in the world? Those rankings kind of move around a little bit. The ranking I saw, just by number of architects, by 2024, it was like you're 12 in terms of architects. So then I started looking at the whole list of the top 100 and seeing how many architects they have. And I started thinking like, that doesn't actually look like a lot of architects. So then I was like, ChatGPT, how many architects work in total at the top 100 largest firms in the world? And then I actually verified it, so I do think this is real. And it came back 36,562. And I thought to myself, wait, hold on a second. The entire world, all these buildings, every country, so much is getting built, and there's only 36,000 some odd architects who work at these firms? Like, that's harder to get into than venture capital. Like, that's crazy to me.
That's not by design. We would welcome people. So Architecture, I mean, as Plato described, it's this intersection of art, science, and industry. And so it takes a very weird person because, the truly smart ones become engineers or lawyers, and then the ambitious ones, they become doctors. And so, like, who becomes an architect? You have to be a little strange by nature, I think, to do it. But what I love about it is that at its heart, design is really you're signaling human intention. There's a reason why most architects will tell you they knew they wanted to be architects at a young age. For me, I was 8. But I mean, this is a very common occurrence. And I think that idea of I'm going to design that to be the perfect little reading nook, the perfect place to sit on an afternoon and read a book, like that idea of creating intention is such a core essence to the creative spirit. You could see
Yeah.
how an architect could go off and become an industrial product designer or a graphic designer, very similar set of skills, but there's something about working with space. So it's almost like an industrial graphic designer who likes hanging out at Home Depot. That would be kind of an architect, I think. So yeah, there's not many of us, and we welcome if you're listening and want to change your career, please join us. We need you. We need your help.
Awesome. So CannonDesign is, I mean, it's not new, established 1915, but consistently and increasingly is recognized as world-class, one of, if not the leader, as Metropolis Magazine called it, planet first architectural firm, whatever terms they're using. It would make sense that you would go there, but you've also had your own practice for years and years and years. You wrote the green buildings for Dummies. You were doing this longer than everyone else. You speak all over the world. And you made a decision 5 or 6 years ago to go in and be director of sustainability at Canon. It seems like a good fit. And I was watching an interview with your CEO, Brad Lukanik. He said a lot of really interesting things, of course, but one of the things that struck me, he said, never be patient with good enough, but always be better in how you do your work. And I thought, that just sounds so much like Eric. I could see maybe there's a culture there which feels like a really strong fit for you to have a platform to pursue your vision and your goals for what you've done for so long around architecture. Let's start there. What led you to Canon? What's going on there?
Very astute observations, as always. So we're a 110-year-old firm, as you said, founded by William Cannon, right? And by the way, you'll appreciate this. Our internal AI is called Billy, in difference to William
I like it.
Cannon.
Yes, I
Uh,
do.
but it's a 110-year-old architecture firm that's been, over the last decade, transforming itself into an innovation firm. And not because it's cool or it's hip, certainly not, but because we realize you need that level of thinking in order to solve the pernicious problems that are facing us today. And that's really it. So I started my own firm in 1997, at the end of the 1900s, as I tell my students. And I was frustrated. My own little firm was 8 people. We were doing beautiful green work, but it was 5 to 10 commissions a year kind of thing. And I was trying to scale that up. And I didn't know how to do it organically. We were growing, but it wasn't fast enough. I'm very impatient, especially when it comes to saving the world. 2008, 2009, I started having conversations with large firms about coming on board. And that list that you mentioned, I probably talked to everybody on that list, and it just went nowhere. It was, yeah, this sounds great, but we're going to shove you under marketing because that's where sustainability should go. Or this sounds great, but how billable are you going to be? Are you going to be billable 95% of the time or 96% of the time? And I started to feel like the Big Lebowski. Like, dude, I'm the dude. Don't you understand? I'm going to do stuff and stuff happens, man. Like that's what it started to feel like. And I thought I don't really know how to convey this. And that was frustrating to me and probably to them. But it wasn't getting me what I want. So I kind of gave up on that dream of working in a large firm entirely. And I went off and did other things. The Living Future Institute came along and said, we're about to launch Living Product Challenge. We need you. You want to help us launch it? So I did that. And then Eco Districts came along and said, we're about to launch Eco District certification. Can you come over and help us do that? And then X Prize Foundation said, hey, we want to launch the X Prize on healthy buildings. And so before you knew it, 8 years flew by. And suddenly it's like 2019, and CannonDesign reaches out to me and tells me this story, which I'm about to tell you. I'll tell you the quick version. But our then new CEO, Brad, he acquired a strategic consulting firm named Blue Cottage, and that's led by a woman named Juliet. And Juliet and Brad together, they're like dynamite. Like the two of them together created a catalytic reaction. They did a strategic plan for the firm, and they realized one of the areas that CannonDesign, this 100-year-old plus firm, was behind in was sustainability. And so they realized they needed not only just to catch up, but they needed to leapfrog. So they reached out to me and said, we need your help. And I said, look, I've been down this road before with large firms. It's always an argument about utilization rates and how billable I'm going to be. And to do this right, you need somebody who's going to engage the entire firm in a change management process. And they're like, we're open to that. I said, I need to be able to touch everything. Yeah, great. I need to be able to report to the core team and the CEO. Yeah, that's what we have in mind. Oh, okay. And then what ultimately sold me was I said, look, I'm only happy if I'm having positive impact in the world. To me, it's not about money. It's not about fame. I'm already famous. To me, it's about impact. I need to know that I'm having impact. And they said, we're working with 19 out of 20 of the best hospitals in the world. We're working with 4 out of 5 top cancer centers in the world. We're trying to solve these juicy problems. You can have as much impact as you want. We just want to set you free to do whatever. And that was it. And to Brad's credit, Juliet's credit, and the entire firm's credit, they've let me do that. So when we were named Firm of the Year by Metropolis that you alluded to, the Planet Positive Awards, that to me was the culmination of the last 6 years of, oh, people are noticing that we're building the greenest buildings that our clients have ever done for them and changing that signal of intention that design really means. So I love it. We're now organized around these 6 global ambitions. They're on our website. Sustainability touches all of them, but the one that I'm in charge of is called Planet 2100. We even put out an annual sustainability report. We call it the Planet 2100 Impact Report. And it shows, here's how we're trying to do this. Here's how we're trying to make remarkable regenerative design for this next century. And it certainly keeps me stimulated, and my team and I we're having an impact.
I love that. The thing that jumps out at me in what you're saying is, here's a firm that has had success, realize it's behind on sustainability, it's a gap, and then says, we're going to just leapfrog and let's just go get a guy who can make us world class. Like, we don't have to take something that's kind of a little bit working, maybe mostly broken, clean slate, let's do it right, which is amazing.
There's a certain humility to it, which you have to appreciate, this idea that, okay, this isn't working. And there were 3 clear mindset shifts. When I told them I need to engage you in a change management strategy, that was true. And that change management strategy, I'm still following the roadmap that we created 6 years ago to do this. In some areas, we're further ahead than where I thought we'd be. In some areas, we're behind where I thought we'd be. But really, I knew that I needed to touch every part of the process. We needed to be able to work across all the teams, which we do. And these 3 key mindset shifts, to me, they would be valuable for any business. And mindset shift number 1 is it's moving from a scarcity fixed mindset into an abundance-based growth mindset. This is something I learned firsthand at Living Future and EcoDistricts and at XPRIZE. And it's funny that I had to go away from my dream of working in a big firm and get those experiences to bring them back into architecture. Mindset number 2 is we have to stop waiting to be asked. Like most architects, a request for proposals would come out, say, hey, we need someone to design a building. And everybody would look at it and go, oh, sorry, they're not mentioning LEED, so I guess we don't need you. You can go back in your hobbit hole and wait there until we need you. Yeah. Okay, so we don't do that anymore. Every building is a green building. We're doing energy modeling and embodied carbon modeling and a whole slew of other things for every single project, whether they want it or not, because it's our duty and responsibility, and frankly, it's our opportunity, right? If we're using sustainability to inform the design, so much better design comes out of it. And then the third big mindset shift, and this one is really driving everything we do, is I'm not here to sell you on sustainability, which is almost counterintuitive. I'm not here to sell you on LEED. I'm not here to sell you on a specific strategy. I'm here to sell you on the outcomes and benefits that sustainability provides. And that's an important difference. If I say a green roof is great, you should do it. Okay, it's immediately going to get cut from the budget as soon as things get tight. It'll be the first thing lopped off of the budget. But if I tell you this building is going to absorb CO2, produce oxygen, create a habitat, clean the air, clean the stormwater, and insulate the top of the building, really? How are you going to do that? Well, I'm going to use a green roof. Oh, is that really? Okay. Well, then it's baked into the design. It's integrated. That does not get value engineered out. That is a powerful difference. I think the mistake that modern sustainability made over the last 50 years is that, and I was as guilty of it as anybody, we assumed that everybody would be as excited about this as we are. Yeah. Everybody wanted to become a PhD in material science and hydrology and air pollution. That was a flawed strategy. We need to get them excited. I can't wait for my sustainability feature to come in because I've sold them on the opportunity and outcomes and benefits that it's going to bring them.
Maybe we'll just work backwards here for a second, because you said you're selling the benefits.
And
I'm
by the way,
sold.
that's total Simon Sinek start with why.
Well, here's where I go. Here's why that triggers for me. Just in some of the other conversations we've had on Supercool. We're talking with Brainbox AI on the show. They're using AI to make buildings smarter. Just in so many ways make buildings smarter, which happens to cut energy costs, makes spaces more comfortable to be in. And the CEO of that company kind of said the same thing. Because I said to him, like, who do you sell to? You make life better for maintenance technicians, facility managers. And he's like, well, that's exactly it. If I go into the CFO and I'm like, you need AI in your building, like, I get kicked out. Like, nobody wants AI in their building. But they do want more comfortable spaces, better facility management, Like, I'm going to sell you the benefits. We're going to get the CEO of Sunrun on. We're kind of theming that around, like, how do you productize these technologies so that you're not just like, you should have solar. No, let's actually think like product marketers and sell benefits. Because to your point around sustainability, it also had this like, it was also kind of besotted with this like, is that a word? Besotted? Sounds good. Everyone should care because we care. Like, this is obvious. You should care because we're saving the planet. And people have a hierarchy of priorities. Maybe they care, but maybe not as much as everybody else or whatever. It's just the wrong way in. But my question to you then, is CannonDesign unique in that way in your industry? Have others not quite figured that out? Because once you say it out loud, it does seem pretty obvious.
I would say so. Now, that being said, the sustainability community is surprisingly small. You think architecture is a small community. The green building community is even smaller. And we're all part of this networking group that's really become like group therapy. So it's the sustainability directors from all the firms in the country. And we get together, and it's mostly, God, can you believe what's going on? But it's wonderful. I would pick up the phone and call any of them and ask them for advice or even just to vent. They would pick up the phone and hopefully could call any of us and do the same. So we know what each other's doing. But yeah, I think a lot of them are still stuck in this mindset. In fact, I had a call yesterday with a sustainability director from another firm. She said, I just need your advice because I'm feeling down. So in a way, we're very unique. But what also drew me was CannonDesign's vision for this. I remember early on, I posed a question. We were doing a new round of strategic planning, and I posed a question to our CEO and our COO and CSO. And I said, could you ever foresee a day where we don't do drawings? And they're like, yeah, as long as we're solving problems for our clients and having impact. Yeah, drawings are just a means to an end. Now, for an architecture firm, that's almost unheard of, right? Like we tend to think, and we produce drawings. That's our product. So that was wonderful to hear. But here's another example. We were sent a request for proposal from an Illinois utility wanting to build a new headquarters. This is a very normal thing. Hey, we want to build a new fancy headquarters. We're looking for an architect who wants to design it. And so I looked at the utility, and they had a plan to decarbonize. They wanted to get off of coal by 2050, and they were bragging about how they were decommissioning coal plants. And then over here, unrelated, we want to build a new building, which is a very carbon intensive thing to do. And so what we proposed to them was, don't build a new building. Why don't you take one of those old coal plants and we'll renovate it and we'll turn it into your new headquarters, and you'll rise like a phoenix from the ashes on the bones of the 19th century that you're trying to get rid of. And they love the idea that they withdrew the RFP and said, reissuing it. I love that we just had that conversation. I love that everybody was on board for that conversation. That to me shows an enlightened firm we're not just interested in getting the commission. We're interested in really rethinking what design can do and what it symbolizes. And that's lovely.
Yeah, that's amazing. So there's clearly some differentiation, some uniqueness, secret sauce in CannonDesign, the culture. I do want to get into some specific projects and talk through things that CannonDesign has worked on, but I also do want to understand this because CannonDesign, if you go on the website, it doesn't just say, hey, we're an architecture firm. It's I see different language. It's like we're an integrated design practice or some other, and it's cool. But if I'm telling my dad, Eric Corey Fried's coming on the show from CannonDesign. Oh, what are they? Well, they're an integrated design practice. So, well, what the F's that? Well, they do build buildings, but I think they do more, Dad. They also put together strategic plans. They're thinking about what's happening in the building. And then I hear the CEO saying, yeah, we've got doctors on staff, nurses, PhD ethnographers. We're really trying to solve all these problems of it's not just about a design. It's about all the people who are in that building and how do they interact with the building, with each other, with the community? It's so multifaceted. And again, I just think, of course, Eric's going to thrive in this environment. But do all the other firms kind of have the same thing going on in terms of like staff or like? No. It sounds like IDEO to me. It sounds like we're a design firm. We happen to be doing buildings.
Hopefully it's peak IDEO, like 1990s IDEO and not.
Yeah.
book
Fair.
name later. But
Fair.
that, by the way, that is such an inside baseball joke for people in the Bay Area. I feel like 5 listeners are going to laugh at that. But the short answer is yes, and by design. We have a director of research. He's a PhD. He's like a real guy. He's like a director of research, and he's how do we mine the projects for the research that needs to be asked? We have a director of innovation. He's an MD, but he's mining the projects for what are things that we could patent together with the clients. Let's redesign the patient bed and think how that could be redone. Right now, we're patenting a behavioral health sink for behavioral health facilities where the patients can't harm themselves. That's kind of incredible. We have strategists who are, former doctors, nurses, who are then talking to doctors and nurses of how do we design your healthcare systems better. We have specialists just in OR design. That's all they do. They obsess over operating rooms the way that I obsess over building performance. Carlos is the leading expert in the world about operating room design. And you hear him talk and you're like, oh man, there's a whole other level there. So it's funny. I'm in these meetings, 20 meetings a day, and I'm with people. They're bringing their A game. They're experts in their thing. And so my team and I have to do the same. We have to come as experts in our thing. So it's very interdisciplinary. We have a software company that we created that does facility condition assessments. Right now, we're using that software company to figure out how to track the carbon emissions of all of our clients because they're going in there anyway and they're tracking the systems anyway. Well, we could track every piece of equipment and give you a carbon profile. We wrote a book, a children's book called Deja the Dynamo that talks about Deja, who's a young architect, and what she's going through. And it's really about equity and diversity, but it's this cute book. And now we're working on volume 2 of what are the next adventures Deja can do. And I want her to do a whole biophilic thing about sustainability. It comes from this kind of collective vision from the top to the bottom and the bottom to the top. But yeah, that's why I chose Canon, or I should say they chose me, right? Because we're onto something here. We think that you want to be part of it. I'm like, I was dubious. And so this living center design ethos, this is not marketing speak. Like we believe this and we get people excited about it. We're finishing up. We just put the topping steel on a new cancer center for University of Chicago. The last beam was just lifted into place and it's a beautiful building. But in design of that, we asked some beautiful provocative questions such as, hey, here's a wacky idea. What if we didn't put cancer-causing chemicals in the cancer center? Like, hey, does anybody object to that? Anybody? Hey, since it's, near the south side of Chicago, what if we just gave south side residents free cancer screenings? Because if zip code is the largest determinant of health, the south side of Chicago zip code is frightening. They have a 10-year shorter lifespan than everybody else in Chicago. What if we gave them free cancer screenings and tried to do something about it? What if we activated the ground floor so instead of being this like scary fortress, it welcomed in the neighborhood? I mean, to their credit, the University of Chicago is like, oh my God, this is what we want. And it also happens to be a beautiful building that I'm sure will win tons of design awards when it's complete. Great. But I love those questions. The more provocative, the better. The what if, to me, is what's been lacking in this intersection between design and sustainability. What if makes it possible? And so I love that we are not only empowered and encouraged to explore these ideas, but just to wonder. I've been teaching for 25 plus years, and my students ask the best questions because they're like, why do we do it that way? That sounds stupid. I'm like, you're right. It's totally stupid. Good question. A for you. I think we get back to that. Lately, I've been on this kick where I don't want to be thought of as an expert because experts first of all, they get things wrong all the time, but experts also have dumb solutions like, hey, I have an idea to reduce traffic. Let's widen the freeways. That'll fix it. No, it won't. That'll make it worse. That's what experts do. I don't want to be thought of as an expert. I want to be thought of as curious. I find in my old age, I'm more interested in getting back to the curious kid that I was at 8. Like, why do we do it that way? Isn't there a better way? Moving to that place of wonder is much more fulfilling and entertaining and joyful for me.
I can totally see that. And I think coming back to what you said to bring this full circle on the sort of mindset shift, if it's stop waiting to be asked with clients, like we're going to kind of we're going to talk about this. We're going to also model energy. We're going to model carbon. We're going to talk about sustainability, not for sustainability's sake, but you're actually going to get to a better design asking these kinds of questions with these principles that the firm has around living center design. But I really love this idea of we're not waiting for the special client who comes along and is like, hey, I want to build a LEED building. It's like, you're engaging with us. This is how we engage, and you're going to like it because this is the best way to build in the 21st century or in 2025. But I like that's the default. And then you mentioned scarcity to an abundance model, and places where you'd been, like X Prize and eco districts and the Living Building Challenge, all these wonderful places where that's the mindset, and being able to bring that. I do want to jump into some specifics that bring this to life a little bit. And one of the projects that I saw that I thought was really interesting, when we think about green building, when we think about LEED, and everyone throws out the stats, buildings are responsible for 40%, 35%, some like massive percent of impact, right? And it's like, I think people hear the number so much that they're like, okay, whatever. Well, what do we do? Let's go build something. And I know your ethos and your firm has won awards and gotten attention for the project you did in Denver, right?
Building 48.
Building 48, right? So a cutting edge, net zero, but a retrofit of something that already existed. And I think that's a real paradigm for people who are even paying attention to net zero. That's like, wait, what? You can do this in something that already exists? You don't have to just build from scratch? We can do net zero in something we already own? Like, how do we think about that?
First of all, what's amazing about that is it was for the federal government. It's for the General Services Administration, the GSA. And they basically were like, hey, we have this site. There's a bunch of buildings on it. We don't know if we need to tear them down or not. And these were, big brick, heavy masonry buildings. It just seemed like such a waste to tear them down. As everybody knows, it can get, cold and snowy in the winter and lovely in the summer. And Denver's a growing, thriving metropolitan area, and on and on and on. We have a great studio in Denver that are game for anything. And I'm smiling because I'm thinking of the people there. And we started talking about this project, and they're like, what do you think? And it's actually 5 buildings that were touching but not connected. So we connected them, breakthrough here, breakthrough there. And, we can cover the roof in this parking lot with solar panels. Well, here's the difference. So we're asking the questions before we design anything. Could we save as much of the buildings as possible? How much carbon would we save? Well, we can run those numbers instantly. If we do that, what are the advantages of it? Well, you get a bunch of cool spaces with these old bricks and stuff. That's kind of fun. Well, does the program fit? Well, we've got software that helps us evaluate that really quickly. What's the solar capacity? Well, here's what it is on the roof. Here's what it is on the parking lot. And again, all this is done before design. We're informing the design early on with analyses, which just makes it great. And then, oh, by the way, we have strong ideas about how to create a workplace for the 21st century that involve daylight, natural materials, fresh air. So you smush them all together, and you get a building like Building 48 that Time Magazine wants to write about. That's the exciting part. But for them, that's their office, and they love their office. And done at a time when the GSA was not sure if people would be going back to the office or not. So let's create a workplace that is better than their house, right? That makes them want to come in. And it's a beautiful space. Yeah, it saved 2/3 of the carbon that a new build would have done. And frankly, I think it's a better product because you do have this kind of mix of old and new with the old bricks. And you do have beautiful daylight coming in. So you get this beautiful controlled even light everywhere. And you do get that great atrium space, and on and on and on. And so that's a great story. But I love, to me, that it's for the federal government. And the GSA has been leading this charge of how you build beautiful high performance buildings.
For a long time.
For a long time, yeah. Going back, the guy that ran the
Martha
GSA.
Combs, I think.
Yeah, Don Horn ran it for years, and he retired. But yeah, they have this vision for it, and hopefully it remains. But
yeah. And then now I'm thinking, because you mentioned the utility in Illinois and said, hey, don't build a building, go into an old coal plant. Of course, we'll make it stunning. But that's such a remarkable idea. And coming from Planted, where our whole conversation about embodied carbon, we have these building materials, they're carbon negative, they will replace other stuff when you build something presumably new, and lots of stuff gets built new. Obviously, that's going to be a massive opportunity. But in that conversation around embodied carbon now, like how much does it cost, like how much carbon is in extracting materials, manufacturing something, transporting it, constructing a building, and at the end, what happens to that material? Just say, hey, let's cut that in half by just using the building stock that exists. It's delightful, but I do think it comes to this notion of but can we accomplish our goals? This is an old drafty building. This is an old, can we really get to net zero, and can we get to something that's actually going to be comfortable and a thermal barrier? It's going to be quiet. It's going to be whatever we want it to be.
Yeah.
There's just such an elegance in my mind of being able to do that on a huge hundreds of thousands of square foot scale.
It's funny because I love the renovations. They have a particular fondness in my heart, in part because my early career was renovating buildings, and I like just working with those constraints, right? There's a challenge to it that's just fun. So the renovations always have a place in my heart, but we're renovating and it's almost done. This office building in Sacramento, it's for California's version of the GSA called the DSA, and it's a building called the Bateson Building, and it's right downtown Sacramento. And what most people don't know is that when it was built in 1980, it was the greenest office building in the world. It was designed by my old mentor, Sim Vanderin, who just passed away recently, and cutting edge, so cutting edge that people didn't even understand it in 1980. And here we are coming along 40 years later to update it. And part of our pitch was we can now do in computers and modeling what Sim intended with the building. We can model that stuff. Sim had this giant atrium. The whole atrium was oriented to the sun. The angle of the fins of the skylights were designed to bring that sun in and have it hit essentially concrete and then warm the concrete throughout the day and store that temperature. There was a giant underground water tank below the atrium that never worked that was storing thermal mass. There were ventilated shutters that were supposed to operate, and they stopped working 10 years after the building opened, that we could fix. He had these thermal tubes that had fans in the bottom that were designed to suck the cool air below and circulate it and break up that stagnant air up top. And they were these very kind of unusual features hanging down from the ceiling. But he didn't have computers in 1980, and now we do. And so the premise was, let's model the building and bring it not just to its former glory, but make it work beyond that with the insight that we now have. And also, by the way, we have strong opinions and ideas about what a workplace for the 21st century should be and feel like in terms of daylighting, because we opened up the rest of the building, and it's now almost done. That to me, that's amazing. And again, they were like, "Well, do we tear it down or do we?" I'm like, "No, you don't tear it down. It's also on the National Historic Register, so we don't want to do that either." But good Lord, it's so cool. And what I love about it is people walk in and their head goes up. I love when architecture forces people to move their head,
Yeah.
and the head goes up and looks at the ceiling. That's lovely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm excited to go look up that building. I want to come back to something else you said when you mentioned the cancer center you're working on in Chicago at the University of Chicago, and you mentioned the idea. You and I have talked about this on many podcasts for going back years and years and years. But you said, "Hey, you're a cancer center. You're here to solve cancer. How about we don't use cancer-causing materials in the building, right?" And unfortunately, a lot of the building materials that we use today in our homes and our buildings are carcinogenic, a lot of the materials, so we know that. My question is, does CannonDesign have a list or a standard or something, or like a vendor list, whatever, but this is the good stuff, this is what we're going to use?
Yeah, and we keep it in a wine cellar in the basement.
Yeah.
It's the good stuff. Well, yes, of course, but I would say most architects, especially large firms, do. There's a lot of amazing tools out there that are industry tools available to
Sure.
everybody, and we
Right.
were early users and adopters of it. Here was the difference. Again, we were kind of coming from this place of thinking everybody would want to get a PhD in phthalates and VOCs and BPA, these classes of chemicals that are harmful for human health. They're all going to want to be as nerdy about it as we are, and they're not, right? Our typical client is a facility manager that's running 30 buildings on a hospital campus, and he or she is like, "Can I run my machines over this? Yes or no? Is it durable, or am I going to have to replace it in 5 years? Yes or no?" Because their KPIs, their metrics of success are way different than ours. So we're designing cancer centers, like I said, for 4 out of the 5 top cancer centers in the world right now. And so we have these conversations. And granted, in the first workshop, I do kind of amp it up a little. Like, isn't this just even ridiculous that I have to even ask this question? But what I love is their response, because we've done this for Memorial Sloan Kettering and for Mayo Clinic and for MD Anderson, Cleveland Clinic. Just amazing. Hey, I've got a wacky idea. Let's not put cancer-causing chemicals in the cancer center. We did this for Ohio Health in Columbus, and we're in the room, man. And what was great is they don't just have administration in there. There's providers in there. Doctors and nurses are in that room. And Ohio Health especially, because I'm giving myself chills telling the story. But they said, "This is who we are. This is our ethos. This is why we're here. This is why we're so special. Of course we're doing this." And then they fine-tuned the wording on the slide, because I just said cancer-causing chemicals. And they said, specifically, let's revise that to chemicals of concern because that's broader. Let's actually talk about the areas that we want to target. And then from that, we ended up generating this list that I called the Dirty Dozen. Now it's called the Watch List because Dirty Dozen sounded too violent or something to our marketing people, but I still call it the Dirty Dozen. And it's 12 categories of materials that normally would go in every hospital. Things that you don't think are a problem, but they're a problem. Vinyl wall covering is a problem. On the one hand, it's great, it's durable, and you can wipe blood off of it. On the other hand, it's releasing phthalates and endocrine disruptors that you inhale and absorb. And for a cancer center or a children's hospital, which we do a lot of, that just seems preposterous to me. When there are better alternatives. Now there weren't 30 years ago, but now there are that are just as durable that you can wipe blood off of. That, by the way, don't cost anymore. But because we have this mindset of overcoming the inertia of normalcy, yes, let's do this. This is our ethos, but we heard these materials cost more. Really? Who told you that? Well, I don't know. Well, have you ever installed these materials? No. Well, then how do you know they cost more? I don't know. Don't they? I heard they're not as durable. Have you ever installed them? No. What? Like just overcoming those bottlenecks, those frictions. And how do you make that frictionless? In fact, one of the exercises we do is a bottlenecking exercise that I run them through of, okay, what are your objections, founded or unfounded? And let's counter each one. And then let's give you big samples of this stuff. Let's give you a 3-foot or 4-foot sample of this, and you can install it and run your machines over it and beat it up, and then give us feedback. And that'll put you at ease. Because I know it's a risk to try a new thing. You have this floor, you know that it's bulletproof, you know what it takes to keep it clean. It's a risk for me to introduce something else. Well, here, let's try it. And so you need to, I don't want to say hold their hand. You need to acknowledge their concerns, legitimate or otherwise, but you need to acknowledge them and then realize that some of them are just, people don't want to change. Change is scary, especially when your job is reduce maintenance requests, keep the project in budget. Like those are your KPIs. For years, sustainability people were trying to, look at our KPIs of fresh air. No, you have to acknowledge that your client's own KPIs, what are their OKRs or whatever acronym you want to use? What are the things they're measuring success by? Let's speak their language, not get them to speak our language. Very important, especially when you're talking about something as radical as here's an entirely new floor you've never tried before. Interested? No.
And do you see that today, 2025, there are more viable options for that facilities manager that meet your criteria from a sustainability perspective and meet them where they are from the performance, whatever characteristics they need to meet, KPIs, OKRs, whatever it is? Do you have a bigger palette to play with than you would have had, say, a decade ago?
Absolutely. Not only a bigger palette, but now virtually every manufacturer now has material transparency. They've put out life cycle assessments and environmental product declarations on their products. There are databases like Mindful Materials, which anyone can go to and look up these things. So our access to information is so much greater than it was in the 80s when I started. Good Lord, where it was a black box of what's in your product. And they would say, go away. And that's none of your business. It was like they're keeping the formula for new Coke or something. Now the expectation is you tell us what's in it. Mm-hmm. And so we're able to look at it through a lens of it's very interesting. There's a green chemist, well, there's several. There's John Warner and Arlene Blum that really shaped this idea of green chemistry. Arlene's site is 6classes.org, and it talks about the 6 classes of chemicals that are not fit for human consumption. And we regularly put them in buildings. You have to remember, the building code does not prevent toxic materials from entering the building. In fact, in the entire 50-year history of the Toxic Substances Control Act, the federal act, they've banned a whopping 5 materials in 50 years because the plastics lobby, the oil lobby, the chemical lobby is just too great. So that's where regulation has failed. So you can put any material you want in a building except asbestos and lead paint. Congratulations. But a phthalate, an endocrine disruptor, one that could trigger early onset puberty in children, yeah, fine, throw it in there. But don't worry, we put a warning label on the box. And by the way, we're going to throw this box away as soon as we install the floor, so no one's going to read it. And people are going to wonder why they feel so blah when they're in their buildings all the time, because they're inhaling VOCs and formaldehyde and particulate matter and, all that other crap. That's the thing. And so transparency is a big one. Cheap ubiquitous sensors is another. For $50, you can install a sensor on a floor, and it'll tell you the air quality of the space. And it's amazing to me how much it changes throughout the day. In an office, everybody comes back for lunch, they just ate a big burrito, and now their bodies are digesting and they're giving off massive amounts of CO2. And the CO2 levels start building up and they get to be 900, 950, 1,000 parts per million. And everybody's like, man, I'm so sleepy from my burrito. It's not your burrito. You're choking yourself out because the CO2 levels in the space are at 1,000 parts per million and your cognitive functions are declining. Like, you need air. Give yourself some air, damn it. So imagine if we put a cheap sensor in that measures this, and when the CO2 levels get to above 900, a fan kicks on and floods the space with fresh air. And what's amazing is the people, they perk up like daisies when you do this. It's like flowers in the sun. So this isn't hard. We just have to start realizing that these can affect certain outcomes. But I'm no longer selling people on, hey, do you want an IAQ monitor that'll measure CO2 levels? No, what do I need that for? Instead, it's, do you want to make your employees more productive? Yeah. How do I do that? Do you want to improve test scores in students? Do you want to improve immune response in patients? Do you want to shorten recovery times? Do you want to boost medication efficacy? Those are powerful outcomes. They would pay good money to get those outcomes. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to use my hippie magic over here to do it. Don't mind me, but I'm going to use everything in my arsenal, in my toolbox of daylighting and biophilic design and natural materials and healthy materials and air quality to do it. But let's design to those outcomes. I mean, talk about a sales case. And in hindsight, it's like, oh my God, what were we thinking? What were we thinking in the 90s? Vanilla Ice aside, what were we thinking in the 1990s that that this would work? Anyway.
Thank you for that. That is certainly a lot to ponder, but gosh, I so appreciate your perspective. And I am so thrilled truly to have this chance to talk to you and hear your take today. Here we are, February 2025. And that you are so empowered, unleashed to do this work on a very grand scale is just truly, just brings me joy to know that is the case.
Wow, thank you.
I'm happy for you. I'm happy for everyone.
I'm happy for everybody.
It's a great day. But seriously, thank you for coming on the show. Really great to hear about the work you're doing in Canon and this wonderful subject. Thank you.
Thank you.